I have my Bible open to the book of Genesis. Actually, Genesis is, look, I think some of the best stories in all of Scriptures are found in the book of Genesis. They're just great. And I think one of my favorites, of course, is the story of Joseph. In fact, I'll tell you that the life, the story of Joseph is one of my favorites actually in all of the Scriptures. What I find fascinating about the story of Joseph is just the sheer length and space that is given to his story in the Bible. Because in Genesis, the story of Joseph starts in chapter 37 and then goes all the way to the end of Genesis, which is 50. So you've got 14 chapters dedicated to the story of Joseph, just to Joseph. I mean, you stop and think about it for a moment. How many other biblical characters can you think of in Scriptures that are allotted 14 chapters? Not too many, that's for sure. So there's something special about the story of Joseph. Hey, look, there's no way that we're going to be able to, in just a few short minutes in this devotional, cover every single aspect of Joseph's story. I mean, there's so much to unfurl that there simply is not enough time or space. But I want to take you to one particular scene, and based on that scene, we're just going to pull out one or two thoughts. But before we get to it, I mean, let's be absolutely clear. At a very young age, Joseph knew that God had a plan for his life. God had something special. God had something unique. God had a plan for his life because, I mean, let's face it, who's the only brother that receives a coat of many colors? And then also, let's face it, who's the only one that's getting these visions and these dreams? Well, it's only Joseph. Joseph knows God has a plan. There's something going on in his life. And of course, Joseph has his own dreams. I mean, he has his own aspirations as to what he wants to become and what he wants to do in his life. So at the age of 17, just still this young teenage kid, he's sent off by his father, some baked goods to go find his brothers that are off herding sheep. Finally finds them. Of course, by now they're extremely jealous of Joseph. They just can't stand him. So they figure, hey, listen, what are we going to be able to do about it? So they throw him in a pit while they're thinking about it. They're enjoying all these home-baked goods. And a caravan of Ishmaelites are coming by. They say, hey, listen, I mean, let's turn this into a win-win. Let's get rid of this younger brother, Joseph, but let's pad our pockets financially along the way. I mean, can't go wrong with that. So they pull him out of the pit. They hose him up on the back of this filthy, flea-infested camel. And as Joseph now, from that exalted height from the top of the camel, can peer into the distance and see the smoke from his dad's encampment, and his heart is just breaking and he's weeping. I mean, do teenagers cry? Of course. His heart's breaking. And he's saying to himself, man, what in the world is going on? I mean, how can this be God's plan for my life? It can't possibly be God's plan. But here's the sentence I want you to tuck away, all right? I want you to think about this. Tuck it away, think about it. You can brood over it for a period of time. But would you agree with this? In order for God to fulfill his plan, what Joseph thought was plan B for his life was actually God's plan A all along. Did you get that? I'm going to say it one more time. So, in order for God to fulfill his plan, what Joseph thought was plan B, being sold into Egypt with the Ishmaelites, was actually God's plan A all along, to eventually save the family of Joseph and many others. But Joseph couldn't see it on the back of that camel. Not at all. You know, I have thought about that, in my own life. There's been a few occasions where I have been in the midst of just living the crucible of life and came to the conclusion, man, what in the world? This can't possibly be, I mean, this certainly isn't what I would consider plan A for my life. I mean, my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, what I thought or anticipated would be happening in my life at that time. And when it wasn't, it's like, man, this is definitely plan B. This can't possibly be plan A. It doesn't make sense. I think the first time that it really kind of sunk in for Sharon and myself is when we were just fresh graduates from Andrews, from the seminary, and we knew that we were going to be assigned to a church by the conference. I mean, that's just the way it works. You graduate from the seminary, you're going to get assigned somewhere. And of course, we knew what Plan A was going to be. I mean, we'd already convinced ourselves that the conference was going to bring us to the large, beautiful city of Denver, that we would be assigned as interns to one of the large Denver churches. We would work there probably for 2 or 3 years. Then they would assign us to a smaller church in the Denver area. Because, I mean, look, we, both for Sharon and myself, we're city people. I mean, we were both raised in the city. I was raised in the city of Singapore. Sharon was raised in the Bay Area, both cities. And look, Plan A, it was very simple. We knew what it would be, and obviously God knows that we're city dwellers and that He would make sure that that's where we ended up. But you can imagine our shock when we get the letter from the conference and we're informed that we have been assigned to a 2 little church district in Wyoming, literally in the middle of nowhere. Well, that definitely felt like Plan B. That was not the plan that we had in mind for ourselves. But we head off to Wyoming. We have a little baby. We're off in Wyoming. I'm telling you, it just felt like so isolated. I mean, we weren't even close to any family. Conference office was hours away. The nearest Taco Bell was 3 hours. I mean, if you wanted a Baskin-Robbins ice cream, you had to drive into Montana, if you can imagine. Extremely isolated. Congregation was made up of farmers and ranchers. We were close to an Indian reservation. It was quite the experience, for sure. In many ways, just completely felt out of our element, because I mean, this was not the environment in which we had been raised in by any stretch of the imagination. But let me tell you something. Even though this just seemed like, it felt like Plan B, let me tell you what happened after 2 years. We'd been pastoring there for 2 years. Out of the blue, I got a call from pastor of one of the large churches in Denver. In fact, this was the church that we originally were hoping that we were going to be able to go and become a part of. Calls up and says, you know, listen, Ralph, we have an opening in our church and love to have you and Sharon come and join our pastoral team, move here to Denver and be a part of what we've got going on here in the church. So I said, hey, listen, I really appreciate it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to think about it. We're going to pray about it. Here's the interesting thing, though, that after 2 years in Wyoming, living out what seemed like Plan B, do you realize that we actually turned that call down? You're probably thinking to yourself, man, that's crazy. This is what you thought was Plan A all along. This is what you were looking for and wanting in your life. Why would you turn it down? I'll tell you the reason why. Because after 2 years in that little district in Wyoming, it was just evident that what we thought was Plan B originally, it was just as clear as could be that this was actually God's Plan A for our lives. Just because of the things that we were doing and experiencing, and just look back and could see, this is the place that we were meant to be. This was the place that God had in mind for us all along. So listen, I think about this story of Joseph. Here he is. He's on the back of this flea-infested, filthy camel. He's making his way to Egypt, 17 years old. So he works for Potiphar for 10 years. Now he's 27. All along he's thinking, God, what kind of a plan is this for my life? This doesn't make any sense. This isn't my dream. This isn't my goals. These are not the aspirations that I had in my life by the time I'm 27. Then he's falsely accused, thrown into prison for 3 years. He's thinking, how does this fit into my life? Then after 3 years in prison, you know the story. I mean, so he's called into the front of Pharaoh to explain a dream. He explains it to him. Pharaoh says, man, what in the world? I need somebody that can head this whole thing up. A famine's going to be coming. We got to get ready for this. And so he sets Joseph up second in command of all of Egypt. And now it begins to make sense to Joseph. God's plan all along. Because you see, only God knew. I mean, God in his divine foreknowledge and in his divine providence, I mean, he knew what was coming. And so he knew he needed to get Joseph to Egypt to ensure that Joseph eventually would be in second command, to make sure that when this famine came, not only would Joseph's family be spared, but all the others as well. So I want to take you to this dramatic scene. So you remember the scene when the brothers show up. They're needing to get by grain to just be able to survive. And it's that dramatic moment when Joseph identifies himself to them as their brother. It's the little kid brother, Joseph. So this is recorded in Genesis chapter 45. So he's pulled all the brothers close, and he's now going to tell them who he is. But I want you to listen carefully how he words it. This is what he says. He says in verse 4, "So they came near to him, and then he, Joseph, said to them, 'I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt.'" You see, that's the plan B. Whom you sold into Egypt. But he goes on and he says, "But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here." Catch this next line. Joseph goes on to say, "For it was God who sent me." That's the plan A. So let's just circle back around to what I shared at the very beginning. In order for God to fulfill his plan, what Joseph thought was plan B was actually God's plan A all along. And that's exactly what Joseph is acknowledging with his brothers. He said, "Hey, listen, you sold me. But I thought that was plan B. But I discovered that it was actually God who sent me. And it's actually plan A all along." Because he goes on once again and basically says, "So that you and your family and the people can be saved from this famine." Listen, what's one of the takeaways from this little story from far away and long ago? Hey, look, I know what it's like in the crucible of my own life and journey to just sometimes wonder why it is that my dreams, my aspirations, my desires, my plans for the life, in fact, even the plan that I think God had for my life, it just doesn't seem to be making any sense. I mean, it just feels like plan B. This is not plan A. Why is this happening? And only as time begins to go by, I'm able to look back and see, you know what? It all makes sense now. What I thought was plan B was actually God's plan A all along, because he was preparing me for what was coming next. So listen, my friend, I have no idea where you are in your journey or the crucible of what you're experiencing right now. I mean, it could be like for yourself and for like me and for like Joseph. You're just simply wondering this isn't where I dreamed I would be at this time and place in my life, or even at this age. This isn't it. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, these dreams that I had, these goals that I had, these plans that I had for my life. I mean, this just seems like, this feels like plan B or C or D or E, maybe even F. But could it be, if you push the pause button long enough and just reflect, could it be that what you and I are experiencing and somehow coming to the conclusion that this is plan B, could it be that in actuality, it's actually God's plan A all along? You know, one of my favorite little verses of scriptures in Psalm is Psalm 138, verse 8, where it just simply says that God will fulfill his purpose for me. That's literally what the psalmist says. that the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me, i.e., two things there. God has a purpose and a plan for your life. And then the second is he'll fulfill that plan and that purpose for your life. So I'm just going to leave you with the words of hey, this is a pastor that I enjoy reading from time to time. I love this line here. I like the way that he puts it. I mean, it's just to me, it's just inspiring. So I'm quoting now. This is what he says. He says, "You were born to live a great adventure. In fact, you were created with a divine destiny. You are called to fulfill a great mission. You were designed for a unique purpose. Now you are called to live it out. Now you are called to live it out." So listen, my friends, wherever you are right now, at this exact moment, you are called to live it out. Whatever it is that you're experiencing, whatever it is that you're going through. I mean, maybe right now you feel like, man, this is no question, this is plan A. Maybe you're in a situation where it feels like it's plan B. Whatever it is, you've got one life. There's no do-overs. Live it out. Live it to the fullest. Just like Joseph, when for all those years it didn't make any sense in his life. It wasn't until later he was able to look back and he could acknowledge to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, because only God knew what he was doing. And he took my life, and he had a plan, and he fulfilled it. What do you say? Let's choose to live our lives to the fullest. I say let's go for it. How about you?